The horror flat. The flat was number 304. No one in the building ever said its number out loud. People simply called it, that flat. It stood at the end of a narrow corridor on the third floor of an old apartment building that leaned slightly to one side, as if it were tired of standing. The paint on the walls had peeled away like dead skin, exposing damp concrete beneath. The lights in the corridor flickered constantly, even during the day, and the air always smelled faintly of rust, mold, and something rotten, something that didn't belong to this world. For years, flat 304 remained locked. Families came and went, tenants changed, but that flat never opened. The landlord never explained why. Whenever someone asked, he would avoid eye contact and mutter, "It's not ready yet." But time passed, and still, it was never ready. Until one day, it was. A new beginning. Ayaan needed a place to live. He was new to the city, freshly graduated, carrying dreams heavier than his suitcase. Rent was expensive, opportunities were scarce, and hope was thinning. When he saw the advertisement, spacious flat, low rent, immediate possession, it felt like fate. The address led him to the old building. The landlord, an elderly man with hollow eyes and trembling hands, unlocked the door to flat 304 without saying much. The lock screamed as it turned, as if protesting after years of silence. Inside, the flat looked normal. Too normal. White walls, clean tiles, empty rooms echoing softly. But something felt off. The air was cold despite the heat outside. The windows were shut tight, yet the curtains moved slightly, like something had just passed through them. Ayaan ignored the feeling. He needed this place. He signed the papers that evening. As he handed over the deposit, the landlord hesitated. "Listen," the old man whispered, his voice barely audible, "if you hear things at night, don't answer." Ayaan laughed nervously. Hear things? But the landlord had already turned away. The first night was quiet. Too quiet. No traffic noise, no distant horns, no barking dogs. The city outside seemed to vanish the moment Ayaan locked the door. At exactly 2:13 a.m., he woke up. Someone was knocking. Slow, soft, precise. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from inside the wall beside his bed. Ayaan sat up, heart pounding. He pressed his ear to the wall. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then came a whisper. Ayaan. His blood froze. He hadn't told anyone his name. The flat watches. Over the next few days, strange things began happening. Objects moved on their own. Lights turned off without warning. The bathroom mirror showed reflections that lagged behind his movements, smiling when he wasn't. At night, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside the flat. Slow dragging footsteps, as if someone was being pulled rather than walking. Sometimes they stopped right outside his door. Sometimes, they came inside. Ayaan would wake up to the sound of breathing beside his bed, deep, wet breathing that smelled of decay. When he switched on the light, the room was empty. But the smell stayed. The neighbors' silence. He tried asking the neighbors. The woman in flat 302 slammed her door when he mentioned 304. The man in 305 crossed himself and whispered prayers. A child on the stairs stared at him and said, "You live with them now." "Who?" Ayaan asked. The child smiled. "The ones who never left. The room that shouldn't exist." One evening, Ayaan noticed something impossible. A door. It hadn't been there before. At the far end of the hallway inside the flat, a narrow wooden door stood where the wall should have been. The handle was black, corroded, and warm to the touch, like living flesh. Every instinct screamed at him not to open it. He opened it, anyway. Inside was a small room with no windows. The walls were covered in scratch marks. The floor was stained dark red. In the center lay a mattress, torn and soaked with something old and sticky. And written on the wall, over and over, in what looked like fingernail scratches. "Do not sleep." The door slammed shut behind him. The truth reveals itself. That night, Ayaan dreamed of the flat's past. Families moved in. They smiled. They laughed. Then they screamed. A woman banging on the walls, begging for help. A man clawing his own face apart. Children standing in corners, staring at nothing. They never left. They couldn't. The flat didn't let them. It fed on fear, on despair, on sleepless minds. It trapped souls inside its walls, replaying their final moments again and again. And now, it had chosen Ayaan. The final night. At 3:04 a.m., every door in the flat opened at once. The walls began to breathe. Faces pushed out from the paint, screaming silently. Hands emerged from the floor, grabbing his ankles. The ceiling cracked open, revealing eyes, hundreds of eyes, watching him. The whispers grew louder. "Stay with us. You belong here." Ayaan ran for the door, but it melted into the wall. The room grew smaller. The flat was closing in. Morning comes. The next morning, the building was silent. Flat 304 stood locked once more. A new advertisement appeared downstairs. Spacious flat available. Immediate possession. The landlord erased one name from his old register. And somewhere inside the walls of flat 304, a new voice began whispering, waiting for the next tenant. Because the horror flat never stays empty. It only waits. The horror flat, part 2, the ones inside the walls. Flat 304 should have stayed silent. But silence never lasts there. 3 nights after Ayaan vanished, the sounds returned, soft crying leaking through the walls, faint knocks traveling from floor to floor, whispers crawling through the building like insects. The tenants tried to ignore it, They always did, because those who listened too closely never slept again. The landlord sat alone in his office, staring at the register. Ayaan's name was crossed out. His hands shook as he closed the book. He had done this many times before, yet it never became easier. Every new name meant the flat had grown stronger. He whispered, "Forgive me," though he wasn't sure who he was asking forgiveness from anymore. A new presence. Inside flat 304, Ayaan was still there, but not the way he used to be. He stood in the corner of the bedroom, unable to move, unable to blink. His body felt light, hollow, as if his bones had been replaced with cold air. The flat had peeled something essential out of him and swallowed it. Around him, others stood the same way. Men, women, children, dozens of them, pressed halfway into the walls, their faces stretched and distorted, mouths open in endless screams that made no sound. Their eyes followed him with desperate hunger. "You're awake," a voice said. Ayaan turned. A woman stood near the door, her neck bent at an impossible angle. Her eyes were sewn shut with black thread. "You can still think," she continued. "That means you're new." What is this place?" Ayaan whispered. She smiled, and blood dripped from her lips. "This is where fear comes to live." How the flat feeds. The flat was alive, not like a human, something older, something that grew from suffering. Every night, it whispered into the minds of its tenants, keeping them awake, breaking their thoughts piece by piece. Sleeplessness weakened them, fear opened them, and when their minds finally shattered, the flat took them. Their bodies disappeared, but their souls were stitched into the walls, floors, and ceilings, forever aware, forever trapped. "You felt it, didn't you?" The woman said. "The watching, the breathing, the way the walls lean closer when you're afraid." Ayaan nodded, tears sliding down his frozen face. "You belong to it now," she said softly. "Just like us." The child in the corner. Ayaan noticed a small boy crouched in the corner of the living room. Unlike the others, the child was moving, rocking back and forth, mumbling something over and over. Ayaan knelt beside him. "What are you saying?" The boy looked up. His eyes were completely black. "It doesn't like when we remember," he whispered. "If you remember who you are, it hurts." The walls groaned. The lights flickered violently. A deep, angry sound echoed through the flat, like a giant inhaling. "Shish," the woman hissed. "You'll wake it," but it was already awake. The flat reveals itself. The floor split open. Ayaan screamed as darkness poured upward like smoke, forming a massive shape, walls twisting into ribs, doors bending into teeth, pipes becoming veins that pulsed with thick black liquid. The flat had a heart. It beat inside the hidden room. Thud, 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 every beat dragged screams from the walls. "You cannot leave," the flat whispered, its voice everywhere at once. "You are mine." Ayaan felt himself being pulled toward the beating sound, dragged across the floor by invisible hands. "No," he screamed. "I'm still alive." The flat laughed. "You stopped sleeping," it replied. That was enough. A small hope. As Ayaan was dragged closer, the child grabbed his hand. "Listen to me," the boy said urgently. "There's one way." The walls screamed louder. "You must make it remember," the child said. "This place was once human. Once." The boy pointed to the heart. "Make it feel fear." The last scream. Gathering what little strength he had, Ayaan screamed, not in fear, but in rage. He remembered his life, his dreams, the city, the sunlight, the hope the flat had stolen. The heart hesitated. The walls trembled. For the first time, the flat screamed back. Cracks spread across the ceiling. The trapped souls held together, their pain flooding the flat with memories it had buried. But the flat was ancient. And it was hungry. With one final, crushing beat, the darkness swallowed everything. Morning again. The building stood as it always had. Silent, normal. Flat 304 was locked. But something had changed. That night, the knocking spread to other flats. And somewhere inside the walls, Ayaan's voice joined the whispers, warning, begging, waiting. Because the horror flat was no longer satisfied with just one room.